play. And another foul on board. His third for setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen.
Pick and roll. And a foul. Offensive foul coming up. Ken Valentine standing right there.
Izzo dying for a moving screen.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Moving Screen Podcast, your Michigan State Big Ten basketball podcast. I'm Brendan Quinn of The Athletic. I'm here with Dylan Burkhart of umhoops.com. Dylan, football's finally over. Are you feeling excited this morning?
I'm well rested because I had to get through that game last night. That was a little brutal. Didn't make me miss football much. We'll just wave it on, and we're into the final home stretch of basketball season.
I think it's great that it's been proven fact that the Super Bowl is better when the Philadelphia Eagles are in it. I think everyone can agree to that. So we'll leave it at that. But it's always a great day when football's done and people can stop talking about it.
Although it pisses me off when I hear people say, "All right, college basketball starts now." No, college basketball started November.
I agree.
We're just throwing away 2/3 of the season because people are too lazy to watch.
This is true, and people are generally assholes. So let's. We usually do this at the end of the show, but we got to do it at the beginning of the show at some point for anyone who doesn't actually make it to the end. But we're going to offer a slight nudge to make sure you check out umhoops.com, become a subscriber there, and get the information and data and videos and all the great recruiting stuff that Dylan does for subscribers only. I can vouch for it being, I think, as good of a kind of, I don't know what you would call it. It's like an alternate like blog site that is kind of operates, I think, within the coverage of Michigan basketball. No school in the country, I think, has a site this good. Is that a fair description of what you're doing over there, Dylan?
That's fair. We're going to hire you as our new chief of marketing here with that branding.
Dude, when I got here in 2000, whatever that was, I think September 2013 was when I got to Michigan from Tennessee. And I came upon the site and I was just blown away that this was like an independent thing operating that way. So it's the model, I think, for kind of independent coverage of a school that every other place in America would probably love to have, at least every fan base would love to have. And then if you got a couple extra shillings after that, make your way over to The Athletic and at least grab a free trial and spend a week seeing kind of not only what I write, but what you can get from The Athletic Detroit for all Detroit fans. We have full coverage of all the four major pro teams. And then our national coverage. We have 14 college basketball writers in the country, and I don't think any other outlet in the country has that many at this point, given what's happened in the business. So over 250 writers total at this point after 3 years. We're in 47 different markets. It's been unbelievable growth. So grab a free trial and just give a peek at what we're doing. And then if you dig it, maybe stick around and grab a subscription. So that's our pitch for the day. And of course, make sure you rate and subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends about it if you know any like-minded folks that would fit into this very small niche that we have. And that's it. You got anything, Dylan, on that front?
No, you covered it. I mean,
good. Now that the pleasantries are aside, I'm going to call you to the carpet.
Uh-oh. What did I do?
As the former mayor of Archie Island, I think now that the Hoosiers are kind of showing a little life, you need to offer a full apology for abandoning your island. It was like 4 weeks ago you were on a rickety little rowboat rowing off over the horizon line, abandoning your island, and here Indiana is with maybe the best win of the Big Ten season. And what do you have to say for yourself, Mr. Mayor?
They also lost to Rutgers on Wednesday.
Well,
the island you can't repair the island in one day. This is a quick fix here. I do think that Indiana, you're always as good as your schedule, and Indiana just kind of fell into a brutal stretch there, playing 5 of 7 on the road, which is just ridiculous. But if you're saying Archie Allen was about winning the Big Ten, obviously that island went away a long time ago. But I think this team could rally and make the NCAA tournament, which would be a hell of an accomplishment if you lose 7 games in a row at really any point in your season.
I just feel like these are your people, and they've been depending on you for some leadership and guidance. And at their time of the most need, I think you really showed your ass on that, man.
Look, it was rough. The 22-0 run at Rutgers, I just sold everything. Just gave it away at cost. Just taking on Elaine. Bill.
Did I lose you?
No, are you still there?
Okay, there we go.
Oh, poor connection. You good?
Yeah,
Did you hear me?
Yeah,
All right.
I think so. Well, sorry to anyone out there who might have just caught those technical difficulties, but well, okay, let's talk about what that game meant. This was obviously, would you agree, biggest win or biggest surprise win, or whatever? How would you classify Michigan State losing to Indiana on its home court as a 14-point favorite?
Yeah, it's definitely the biggest win of the year, and probably the biggest win Archie has there. But I mean, it's the biggest conference win in terms of being on the road and the gap in teams, right? Like, there's none of the other 4 teams that really lost to maybe Wisconsin, but it's definitely the biggest win of the year, I would say, in the conference. And I definitely did not see it coming. I can't try to say that. Did you have any inkling that would be even a close game, let alone?
No. After 5 days or 6 days off, whatever it was, coming off the loss at Purdue, I really felt like they were just going to kind of buzzsaw right through Indiana. The most surprising thing to me was them getting out rebounded the way they did. I think it was 48-40. Indiana had like 20 offensive rebounds, and they were out rebounded at Purdue. And I just, everyone knows Izzo and how he handles practices after something like that happens. There's obviously no shame in being out rebounded at Purdue, but I just assumed they were just going to come in and just, bully ball them down low and get out and running and come, high flying and all that good stuff that you see when Michigan State's at its best. But
so first of all, no more rebounding margin, because Michigan State, more than any team, just explains why you can't do that, because you think of them as a great rebounding team, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're a great offensive rebounding team. They're first in the Big Ten in offensive rebounding rate. They're second to last in defensive rebounding rate. If you slam those two numbers together and then add in the fact that they have the best field goal percentage defense in the Big Ten, all of a sudden you're talking about all different things when they get out-rebounded, as you
Is
say.
there a total rebounding rate?
You could do that, but it wouldn't really make sense because they're completely different things.
How many times have they given up 20 offensive rebounds?
They've
That's
allowed
a ridiculous
40%.
number.
So back-to-back games, like you said, Purdue and Indiana rebounded over 40% or more of their misses, which is very bad. And that's the number that matters, and that's the number that I wonder how it plays into the fact that their 2-point defense is so good and they block so many shots, and if they're trying to block almost too many shots. Whereas you look at Kenny Goins is their best defensive rebounder.
Yeah.
He had 8 blocks. If
Right.
he's blocking 8 shots, he's not rebounding those. I wonder where the balance is in terms of. I also just think it's utterly ridiculous for teams to make 41% of their twos against Michigan State, but when you miss that many shots like in and around the basket, it's kind of just a scrum, and there's a lot of guys missing a layup and getting a putback, stuff like that. So I don't know. This is something we've seen from Michigan State. At least, I don't know about last year, but maybe 2 years ago, where they kind of were not good on the defensive glass. No, I guess not. They're kind of gone away on the offensive glass. But I can't imagine a Michigan State team that's second to last in the Big Ten in defensive rebounding, and here we are.
Yeah, I mean, you hold a team to 34% on twos they made, 35% on twos Indiana did. Best offensive player goes, 6 for 18. Committed 3 turnovers. It was a really strange game statistically. And then the glaring number of Nick Ward going 1 for 9 from the free throw line and the team going 8 for 22 as a whole, it's going to make it pretty difficult. Do you think it's just a matter, what's your cause for concern coming out of a loss like this? Is it outlier, or is it a sign of things to maybe be concerned about? And then I'll tell you what I think.
I think it's a little troubling, sort of. I think it says something about where Michigan State is at mentally, maybe coming off that loss and coming off of Langford being officially out for the season. I also think that I don't think that what Indiana did to win that game is necessarily repeatable.
Exactly.
Nick Ward will probably make more than 1 out of 9 free throws in most games. I think the 3-point shooting is something we didn't talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Indiana made half their threes, 10 of 20, I think, and I saw a lot of talk about, they shot 27% or whatever before that game, but a team that shoots 27% from 3 is going to make 2 or 3 extra threes sometimes, and they're going to make 2 or 3 fewer threes. So you compare how they shot from 3 against Michigan. I think they were like 2 of 20. How they shot against Michigan State, and they went 10. I mean, that happens. There's that variability plays into it, and we've talked, I think, on a recent pod about how Michigan State allows a lot of 3-point attempts, but their 3-point percentage allowed is really low, and whether that is really a sustainable number or kind of will regress toward more of that low 30s rather than 29% on threes. And I guess we saw a little bit of that. And I think that's almost a bigger worry in terms of what's sustainable.
Right. I agree that just the numbers say this was such a strange game that it's not replicable. I would sell on the idea of, oh man, this is a telltale signs of bit larger problems or anything like that. Just because I think Michigan State can play a lot better, and you're not going to go 8 for 22 from the free throw line. I think it's a good thing. This team only committed 10 turnovers. Like, there were some good signs from this game. What do you think of this tight 7-man rotation that's now in effect? I mean, beyond the top 7, that's the starters plus Xavier Tillman and Kyle Arns. Izzo played 3 minutes to the rest of it, gave 3 minutes to the rest of his bench. Gabe Brown played 2, Foster Loyer played 1. Other than that, every single guy on the team played over 25 minutes.
What's the reason to play Gabe Brown or Foster Loyer more minutes?
I agree. But
you have to do something. We talk about this with Michigan all the time. Why aren't they playing the bench? They don't do anything.
I agree.
If you can't make a positive impact, I don't know. I think long term, you need Aaron Henry to become a dude in the next month.
Yes.
And playing him low 20, he needs to be the guy. And so at 31 minutes, like, that's what you need. I mean, obviously he didn't have a great game, but he can do a lot defensively against Langford. Like, I like his tools. And I mean, I think you need to focus on what you've got at this point in the season. It's not about building this huge bench. I mean, you don't trust Gabe Brown in a game like this is pretty clear, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it certainly appears that way. 7 guys is tight. It's definitely tight. But you're right. I mean, you can't just throw guys out there just because, ideally you have, a couple extra minutes going here or there. If it's not being productive, you can't just do it for the sake of doing it. So Aaron Henry. So we talked for a good while in the locker room after the game, and I asked him about Josh Langford's injury and what it means to his role and what it kind of means for what he needs to be and who he needs to be, and how he views himself offensively within the construct of this team. And he sounded like a guy. I'll be writing this for the Athletic shortly, and you guys will see the full quotes, and I think they're pretty interesting. But he's a guy who's very much in his own head, I think, a little bit right now on what shots he's supposed to take and what offensive player he's supposed to be and how aggressive he's supposed to be and kind of where he falls in line with Cassius Winston and Nick Ward and Matt McQuaid and all these guys who just kind of, take volume shots. It was really interesting, and I don't know if it's a matter of like him being, I think he's told all the time, like, you have a 100% green light to do and take whatever you want. But, he played 31 minutes in this game and took 5 shots, and that's it. And I think he's too talented to only be taking 5 shots a game. I think they have to. I don't know if it's a matter of putting him in different spots to get different shots, or if it's a matter of just demanding that he shoots more. What do you see in that front? Because I think he's got the highest ceiling. And when you talk about like how can Michigan State be different, or how can Michigan State improve in the next 5 months, like that's the big circle highlight item. Is like if Aaron Henry takes a huge step forward, this team looks different.
Yeah, I think it's really hard for a young player in the Big Ten when you're in the thick of the Big Ten season and you don't trust your three-point shot to adjust to being scouted. And at this point, everyone knows he's going to catch the ball on the spot up and he's going to put it on the ground. He's going to try to go to the rim and dunk it.
Yeah.
And if that's really all you're going to do, you become very guardable in a Big Ten season. I mean, we've seen it with Charles Matthews. Like, it's the same thing, right? You get in, and then you start to get in your head, and they're telling you need to shoot more, but you don't trust your shot. I think that is like the hardest mental battle to get over. It's just, and I could see in that situation, he completely breaks out in like the NCAA tournament where all of a sudden you're not as well scouted, and you get some of those opportunities that you kind of get in non-conference season. I think that's sort of the biggest thing, is just how far can you really go when you don't trust your jump shot.
Yeah. And I don't know, you probably have access to his AAU 3-point numbers and things like that, but like you watch him stand and shoot, and you certainly imagine like guy looks like a decent enough shooter to me. I mean, he might not be, a 42% shooter or something like that, but at least looks like it should be a threat. I think he's probably a better shooter than he's shown. I've got him at 6 for 17 on the year, 2 for 7 in conference games.
And 15 to 27 on free throws.
Ouch.
That is one that you always look at as sort of a projection of how reliable their shot actually is.
Yeah. And like he even kind of, that like in between game, it's either all the way to the tin attacking and things like that, or nothing, pretty much. He's definitely one of their best options when they get out on the break, though. I don't know. Maybe, do you think it might be a little bit short-sighted or maybe fool's gold to think that he has a dramatic step forward in him?
No, because all the time we've seen, he has the physical tools to really, like on that court on Saturday night, who was the dude who really was the same caliber of athlete as Romeo Langford?
Totally.
And you need a guy like that.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of working through those growing pains and developing on offense. But he makes them such a more well-rounded team athletically, I would say, that he's definitely the guy you need to focus on getting ready. You look at the box score, and what stands out to me is that McQuaid and Arns only were 2 of 6 from 3, and you need to get them more spot-up looks, which I guess you got to give some credit to Indiana. I also thought Indiana did a good job of limiting that transition game fairly well, which is sort of the first thing you have to do to slow down Michigan State. But I don't think anything about Aaron Henry's fool's goal. I just think you have to work through the process, and that's where they're at right now. And you probably are accelerating that learning curve because of Langford's injury.
And last point on this, I think it was, it's really telling that when it came down to it, and everyone knew Romeo Langford was getting those shots late in the game on Saturday, that it would, State just stuck with Henry and went with him. Even on that one play where they kind of ran a little bit of a high brawl screen that kind of just put a little tag on Henry out top, and then he got a little leverage and was able to go down the right side and had that great finish over Henry. And I think Kenny was also in on that play, and he put it high off the glass. It was a beautiful play. And the next circumstance came, right? Next possession, they knew it was going to be Romeo out top, 4 down, let him go one-on-one and send a screener out there. And they stuck with Henry. And I wondered right before that play, I said, do you switch and maybe go McQuaid this time and just go with the more, your best defensive perimeter guy, and they went with him, and it was a great job defensively on that last shot. Now, also, Romeo took a absolutely horrific James Harden step back for a guy who's shooting 25% on threes. It was really bad, but point being, I thought it said a lot that the coaches went with him and said, because they had McQuaid on Langford a little bit in the first half, then switched to Henry and rode him for the rest of the game, and it paid off. Langford finished 4 for 13 on twos, 2 for 5 on threes, with 3 turnovers in 41 minutes. So he did the job.
Yeah, and he, like we said, he has those tools, and I don't know that there's really another guy on that roster who does have those tools, right? Like when Michigan comes to town, he'll go Charles Matthews, and
Sure.
That's like a equal matchup in terms of physical talent, and not every team really has that kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
He gets them an option to run in the wing, finishing. Like there's so much they get out of him. It's just like throwing him into the deep end now down the stretch
Yeah.
here. They kind of over the last month, like they've sort of been easing him into that role, but now I think you have to just see how much you can get from him over the last 2 months of the year.
For sure. So this week, whereas I think the loss to Indiana was interesting because it wasn't exactly the Indiana team that has been so bad for so long in recent months, or I guess the last month, because getting those 2 guys back, Green and Deron Davis, that made them clearly a different team. So I'm not sure exactly how you would gauge, like, man, they lost to the Indiana team that was 3-7 in the Big Ten.
They also lost Juwan Morgan, which was a big injury, and it changed their situation. And I mean, Deron Davis
was awesome.
I don't think he played 25 minutes in the first Big Ten games combined, and then he came out. I know they were trying to rest him up and get more from him, but he completely changed the game for them, and he hasn't really played at all in their losing streak. He played 10 minutes, and they just kind of shut him down. I mean, that's a big change, and I think Devontae Green gives them an athlete that can kind of get he doesn't shoot a high percentage because he mostly only takes tough shots, but he's a guy who can actually hit some of those tough shots and just make a play when everything else breaks down.
And he is at least a capable 3-point shooter.
Mm-hmm.
He made 3 or 4 in that game. That's huge. You take out, if he's still suspended for that game and he doesn't make 3 or 4 threes, they probably lose because they don't have someone to plug in there who is actually able to make a 3-pointer. So this week, we talked a lot about Illinois last week and how we're both kind of high on the direction that team is going. I haven't waned from that. I still think it's a team that you just don't want to play them, and you especially don't want to play them on their home court right now. They have, in the past 2 weeks, they've beaten Minnesota there, they've beaten Nebraska there, and they've beaten Maryland on a neutral floor. It's a team that speeds you up, obviously, that is dangerous, that has some pretty good athletes, and is annoying to play. And I think probably has a little bit of confidence going in its direction and will invite the opportunity of having a top 10 team on its home court. What are you thinking for this one?
So you kind of look at it where Michigan State, you always worry about the turnovers, but you also worry about trying to defend Michigan State if you are pressing and playing a super fast game and they can just run you out of the gym. So that would kind of be, you want to turn Michigan State over, but you also could just let Winston get 15 assists in transition. Aaron Henry has 8 dunks, and it's just a blowout. And that could happen in a flash. That kind of, you look at what happened in that Iowa game, where Michigan State was kind of stuck in the mud against Iowa, and then they got out and ran and just hit a couple threes, and all of a sudden they blew them out of the water. I could see that kind of a thing happening at Illinois, but it's also not, like you said, it's not a fun place to play. They play a style that's just miserable to play against. They're going to foul you a ton. They're going to make Nick Ward shoot another 10 free throws and see what happens, and he's going to have to kind of face those mental demons, so to speak. It'll be interesting. Illinois is playing very well, and they're not as bad as their record is because they just have played this brutal schedule, second toughest schedule in the country right now. So it'll be a good test. If you're Illinois, you probably aren't really happy that you're playing Michigan State off of a 2-game losing streak. But
Sure.
what do you see out of it?
I don't know. I mean, there's some red flags that would make me a little uneasy for if you're Michigan State going in. They're a guy like Georgie Bichonvili will no one would be surprised if he draws a couple fouls on Nick Ward early. That's the style he plays, where he gets guys in weird spots and he knows how to play into you with contact and draw contact. He can put him in foul trouble. Obviously, Nick Ward can do the same. I think Nick Ward's like among the top 10 in the country in fouls drawn per 40 or something. But they've got some dudes. Ao is a real player who he would actually look great at Michigan State. But their numbers offensively are still kind of all over the place, and you're never really quite sure what you're going to get. And I don't know. I saw that, I was at the Michigan game down there, and that was a night where they would have these stretches where you're like, man, they're definitely going to win this game, and then they just have stretches where maybe the defense just kind of gets on its heels a little bit, or isn't quite as locked in, or isn't taking the next step out, and it's just so easy. Like, if they're just not at extreme effort for 40 minutes, like the second that they take a dip, it's just so easy to score on them. So,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Coaches talk about like 4-minute segments between media timeouts and stuff like that. And Illinois would play probably 4 segments like that where they could beat anyone in the country, and they would play 4 segments where they would just lose to anyone in the country. And you just have to, and they've started to kind of get rid of some of those stretches, but that is kind of, the whole thing can just go off the rails when you're playing just like balls to the wall, just going crazy pace. You make 5 mistakes, all of a sudden the game changes in 90 seconds.
Right.
That's a problem for them.
Yeah, last week they held Nebraska to 64 and gave up 86 to Minnesota. It's kind of hard to figure out what they're actually going to be. But they are different at home, and when you get the home court, or when you get the home crowd going with you, it does make it easier, I think, to actually play that way for 40. So it's dangerous, and I'm not sure. It looks like Ken Pom has it as an 11-point Michigan State win. I don't know. They're maybe a little bit due to make some threes, so maybe they can get them that way. But
this is what I'm talking about with how they can just go off the rails. They were up 47-42 in the second half at Minnesota, and then they lost 86-75. So it just, when it falls quickly for them. That's for sure the case. And Michigan State is a team that can land on that 5 basket in a row run that just completely changes the game, as well as probably any team in the country, I would say.
Yeah. All right. What's your call for this game?
A Michigan State wins. It's a bounce back spot. First half is close.
Yeah, I'm going to say it's really uncomfortable for a minute, and then, mid-late second half, Michigan State puts together a run, maybe a la that game at Iowa, and finishes it out. It'll be really interesting to see what the pressure, how Illinois dials up its pressure specifically to address Cassius Winston and what kind of game he can have. Right now, I think the play against Michigan State is just throwing 2 guys at Cassius as much as possible. So we'll see how that plays out. I think we're going to talk about that maybe a little bit more next week. I'm kind of interested in what you think about how teams are defending Winston out of ball screens. Indiana, you saw kind of throw 2 guys at him a little bit more. So we'll see. But
Cassius Winston at Illinois last year, 5 points, 8 assists, 8 turnovers, 5 fouls in 20 minutes.
That's probably something to keep an eye on then, isn't it?
So I think they have like length and athleticism in the backcourt. That's kind of, I could see that being at least a thing. Miles Bridges had 31 on 11 of 13 shooting, but it'll be interesting to see kind of how Cassius handles some of that pressure, because the knock on him has always been, how does he handle elite length, athleticism in the backcourt like that, and they can throw that at you.
And they'll be guarding him for 94 feet, and they're going to trap him, and if he's making quick decisions, they can pick it apart. If he gets
And it's not a game you can play foster lawyer.
No, it is not. And if he gets bothered by it, that could be an issue. So we'll see. That's the game I will be at tomorrow. I'm heading to Champaign. Meanwhile, Michigan will be flying east and heading to Rutgers. I am missing that game for obvious reasons, but it's easier to drive to Champaign than it is to fly to Newark or Trenton or Philly or LaGuardia. But okay, so we're going to move over to Michigan here. What did you take? You were at the game in Iowa. I was at the game in Iowa. I thought Iowa played extremely well, first of all, and that they deserve a lot of credit. It was basically the game they played against Michigan State, except for 40 minutes instead of 25, and they were really impressive. So a 15-point loss. Beeline was pissed off at a couple of things afterward. But what was your first take from this one?
If you drew up, I mean, we talked about this probably a month ago.
Yep.
The way Michigan would lose is John Teskey gets 2 early fouls. He got 2 fouls in 85 seconds. So that is not great in the first half.
Yep.
And Iowa's also probably one of the best designed teams to exploit that weakness in Michigan. They post it up more than anyone. They draw fouls. It's just kind of what they do. And they was like, I don't remember how many, like 27 fouls or something in the first. It was just, that's exactly the kind of game that Michigan can't play. And I don't know that, I mean, it was the same crew mostly who called all those fouls in that Penn State game the day before. And like, they're going to have games like that. And Michigan did not respond, and they kind of just let the wheels fall off there in the middle of that first half. That's really the first time I think, like, the wheels fell off at the end of the Wisconsin game, but we haven't seen Michigan fall behind double digits early in a game all year. So it was interesting to see kind of how they reacted to that, and I guess how it happened.
Yeah, and they kind of showed that burst late in the half where Poole made the back-to-back threes, and you're like, okay, you know, if they can make a little push here and get it to like 6 at halftime, you know, all good pretty much at that point. And then, if I remember correctly, Iowa just face guarded Poole for the last 3 minutes of the half. Basically, just took him out of the offense. Michigan couldn't draw anything up. Iowa instead flipped it and made, you know, ended up carrying what was the lead at halftime? It was double digits.
It was like 12 or 13,
yeah.
I think.
Which is a lot. You know, that's a lot to come back from on the road, without a doubt. But there were a lot of interesting things. I'm going to talk a little bit about Jordan Poole more here in a second. But, you know, I thought this was the perfect game. They weren't making threes, weren't shooting well. No one could really get anything going. This was, and I think we've talked about it like 2 or 3 pods in a row, this was the perfect example of a game where Michigan just could not get any easy baskets. The transition offense just does not exist. And this would have been a great game because Iowa will run. Right? You can get out and play quick and do stuff and go back and forth a little bit with Iowa. And Michigan is just not getting anything out in the open floor. They just, every single time, they just go into the half-court offense, and if shots aren't falling or they can't dial up good looks or if they're being defended well or if they're in a situation like this where teams switching defenses and going zone, going man, and it's really hard to play half-court offense, then you get this. And it's a 59-point game, lowest point per possession of the season, right, Dylan?
It was the same as the Wisconsin game.
Wisconsin, yeah. And Michigan had 2 fast break points against a team that you can get out and run against.
Yeah, I posted a story yesterday, talked a little bit about the transition offense. Michigan in 5 of the last 6 years has been in the 90th percentile or better in terms of how efficient they are in transition.
Wow.
They are in the 42nd percentile this year. So when they run, they kind of just, they don't have an option and they don't finish those breaks, and that is just a killer because their half-court offense is not good enough to really grind out points every single possession. And
right.
I disagree a little bit with the idea that they didn't create scoring chances or like good chances. I mean, they missed a ton of layups. I think they were like 5 of 15 or something like that on layups at one point.
A lot of them were contested, though. I mean, these weren't backdoor, wide open layups, blah, blah, blah. Like, I mean, they were contested shots.
Yeah, I think most teams would settle with contested layups, and then they
Okay,
miss
it's fair.
jump shots, right? And that is really like they're not going to miss 10 layups in every game. The fact that they cannot hit open jump shots is just going to kill them in any game. And it's not about man or zone. I know everyone likes to talk about why doesn't every team just zone Michigan. I was looking at the synergy stats from this game. Michigan actually scored on a higher percentage of their possessions against Iowa's zone in the half court than Iowa's man to man.
Right.
So it was close, but their offensive problems can be exploited against a man or a zone. You can just play a sagging man defense. You're going to still give up open jumpers. It's just the fact that open 3-point shots are not going in for Michigan right now, and it's hard to win when you can't hit open threes.
Yeah, I mean, when you combine the fact that, like you said, so they went from the 90th percentile to the whatever it was, 40th percentile in, what was it, efficiency in transition?
Yeah.
So you combine that with the fact that this team is one of Beeline's worst 3-point shooting teams in his tenure. And, like, I mean, when people ask what's up with the offense, like, well, that's okay, there it is, right? Because you're right, zone or man, they're shooting 34% on threes this year. It's not great. And
Yeah, and they were shooting probably 38% a month ago, and they've been shooting high. What are they in the Big Ten? They're at 31.5%. So they're and that number is dropping. So it's really they've been shooting a lot worse than that in this last 5-game stretch. Their offense over the last 5 games averaged out 0.92 points to possession, on par with the worst offense in the Big Ten, which is Northwestern. So Northwestern for the season is averaging what Michigan's averaged over the last 5 games. That's not great. And they're also not going to shoot. Like, 3-point shooting is very variable, especially you talk about, like, confidence. A couple shots go in, it can all kind of change. But I think it really comes down to fixing the offense starts with Jordan Poole.
Right.
And he needs to be the guy.
It's not just a blast on Poole and say it's all on him, but when you look at what is going on, it's all arrows point in the same direction, and that's a lot to put on a sophomore. But Jordan Poole's a big boy, and I'm pretty sure that he would acknowledge all of this himself. But let's go since the Penn State game, right? So this is basically since Big Ten play restarted. His 3-point shooting: 1 for 4. 2 for 6, 1 for 6, 1 for 3, 1 for 5, 0 for 3, 2 for 5, 3 for 10, 3 for 9. When you say that they've dipped from basically 38% shooting as a team to 31% shooting as a team on 3-point shooting, this is basically where those numbers reside. Because if you go back earlier in the season, he was making 5 threes every now and then, making 4 threes, went 6 for 10 against Binghamton. This is supposed to be your elite shooter. And this is supposed to be the guy that keeps opposing defenses honest. He not only, everyone's talked about, he needs to be able to create. I've talked about this, right? Putting him in ball screens and letting him create out of stuff and being kind of the facilitator, the alpha, your Karis LeVert, Nick Stauskas guy. Okay, that's all well and good. First of all, this thing needs to get back to him being a shot maker and making threes and taking and making good shots, because not only is he missing a lot of shots, but he is taking some poor shots.
Yeah, and Beeline, about as close as he'll get to calling someone out after a game. I thought he was pretty harsh on Poole in his quote after that Iowa game, and he basically said there's only so many my bads you can have in a game, and he had too many. And he missed probably the biggest shot of the game. I think they had it down to 7, and he got a wide open 3, and he missed it in the second half, which would have cut it to 4, and then who knows what happens. It's really just, and it's not just him, it's that no one else on the team can really hit those open threes either. If someone else, so it's not just pointing the finger at him. It's just, are you going to try to draw up a catch and shoot three for Charles Matthews or Jordan Poole? It's going to be Jordan Poole every time. He just needs to make those shots. He's at low 30s in his Big Ten shooting percentage, and that includes he was 6 of 10 in the 2 early games. So he's really basically been a sub 30% shooter in league games since New Year's, and they need to get that figured out because really any good offensive game they've played this year, Poole has shot the ball well from 3.
Yeah.
And I think some of it is that they're kind of pulled in different directions. How many players in the main rotation would you guess have a positive assist to turnover ratio in Big Ten games?
I will say Simpson, Livers, Teskey.
Simpson, Teskey, and Eli. And Eli's fringe. Brazdakis, Matthews, Poole, and Livers all have a negative assist-to-turnover ratio. So at this point, Michigan's offense is basically have Xavier Simpson dribble around, find someone to pass to, or make a play himself. That is leading to Simpson taking a bunch of threes, which is also probably why no one else could get an assist, because whenever they try to do anything, it ends up with the defense cheating off Simpson, and they have to pass to Simpson, who's wide open. So they're just sort of like, they need to find the right balance, and I'm not really sure what it is.
Right. There's no glaring solution for sure. I mean,
making open shots is the solution.
Exactly. And it is, it's not a coincidence that they look a lot different when suddenly Matthews is like making his little variety of in-between shots, right? When he gets in and pivots 400 times and then puts up a floater and they all go in, and suddenly, oh man, the offense is really cooking now, whatever. That's not that much different than Jordan Poole jab stepping 15 times at the top of the key by himself and then launching a contested 3. Sometimes those are going to go in, and
the numbers say that jab step 3 is probably a higher respective value than Matthews doing the pivot in the lane there. But I think that Matthews has not been good on offense by any stretch, but I don't think he has the ability to transform Michigan's offense by making all those shots. I don't know that it's as direct, like him playing well is as directly correlated to Michigan's success. Whereas Poole, I think, really does change the dynamic if he's hitting shots, and it makes Michigan almost impossible to guard.
It's really hard to play right now for them to do what John Beilein wants to do, and he, for a guy who always talks about the ball not sticking, making the extra pass, they obviously value assist in this system. Well, Jordan Poole and Charles Matthews have played a combined 201 minutes in the last 3 games combined. All right, so those two are essentially playing 34, 35 minutes a game in the last 3 games. They have combined for 6 assists in 201 minutes between the guys who have the ball in their hands. Combined, maybe not as much as Xavier Simpson, but the bulk of the game. The ball's going to those 2 guys, and you're just not getting any. No one else is getting anything from them, if that's the right way of saying it. And I don't know. I mean, that's probably the question for John Beilein's having a press conference today at 1. Maybe that's a stat to throw at him and see what he has to say about it. Because I would love to know what he's cooking up in the lab right now when he's watching this film. I was trying to say, because Beilein, to his credit, is as adjustable of any coach as you'll see, and he will trash things and go to other things and try to adjust on the fly. And this is something that has to be. This has to be addressed in the next couple weeks, because they are so obviously vulnerable when it comes to the bad day that can come up in March. And right now, it's when shots don't fall, and if John Teskey gets in foul trouble, they're done.
Yeah, I think the foul trouble makes them more any team.
Definitely.
Like I think they're as prepared to win shooting 28% from three as any team in the country because their defense is so good.
True.
And if John Teskey and Isaiah Livers can play more than 4 minutes or whatever it was in the first half, that Iowa game is completely different. Like that's the real vulnerability for me because when Teskey was on the floor, their defense was still great.
Mm-hmm.
And if anything, we saw in the tournament, they won a bunch of games last year where they couldn't really make shots and they won with their defense. So I don't think that's impossible. Xavier Simpson is shooting over 4 threes per game in Big Ten play, and he's shooting 21% from three. And he made 5 of 10 in one game, and it's just has not been able to make those shots.
But it's hard when a guy's playing 35 minutes and he finds himself wide open sometimes. Like, I'm not sure what you're supposed to do there.
And if he could hit, like, it's just like I don't know what you do. And he does so much else.
Right.
I mean, even at Iowa, he almost had another triple-double.
Mm-hmm.
He had 10, 8, and 7. I mean, he's the only one that can do anything to really get other people into scoring spots. But I think his lack of shooting takes away from everyone else's ability to create because it's just sort of a bottleneck.
Yeah. It's an interesting team. I mean, for a team that's 20-2, you can sit here and be like, man, there's this and that. And, we could sit here and talk for the next 10 minutes about how they need more at Isaiah Livers pretty easily, right? It's a strange group. But I guess when there's just, they are easy to pick apart in terms of what's not there, but they're still rolling along, and in a tie for first place in the Big Ten. But I've never seen a team that is ranked in the top 10 nationally play 4 different centers in the first half. That was one of the strangest things I've ever seen. Right?
I mean. Yeah,
they played Teskey. They played Teskey, Livers, Johns, Castleton, and Austin Davis. 5
and Davis. Yeah,
they had 5 different guys at the 5 position in the first half of a league game,
and none looked particularly impressive.
No. I asked John, did you watch the press conference?
I was there.
Oh shit, that's right.
In Iowa.
So when I go, I was unsure how to ask the question about the foul trouble, so I asked Beeline, you had to know this was going to happen at some point when Teskey gets a foul in the first minute and suddenly your rotation is basically out of whack for the entire game. How in your mind was that going to play out in real time? And he just turns and goes, well, I thought it was going to go better. But then Ethan Sears later in the press conference, a Michigan Daily writer, in a pretty telling moment, asked John if this game offered any clarity of what he's going to do at the backup 5 spot, and John responded by asking him, well, what would you do? And Ethan, to his absolute credit, goes, I'm not the coach. Great answer, Ethan, wherever you are. And Beeline goes, well, yeah, I don't have a backup 5 right now. And that's how the press conference ended, and I'm pretty sure that's what John was thinking about the entire flight home, is what you do there. Because has anyone shown you... What about Colin Castleton? Why not at this point?
Yeah, I tend to think that after 22 games, if you ask why not, there probably is a why. Yeah. But he looked fine when he was on the floor for a little bit, but it was also at that point, it wouldn't take much. Like your expectations were kind of dumbed down at that point. You didn't really...
True, totally. But at the same time, the staff loves his upside. They love Colin Castleton. You talk to Luke Yaklich about him, and he will rant and rave for... Now, he's also his recruit, so... But he's a tough guy. I know he looks rail thin. He's tougher than he looks. I don't think he'll back down in the post. He's got great length. He can shoot. I know he hasn't made a 3 yet, but...
He's got 3 up there in about... Probably 12 minutes this year.
Good for him. Shoot your shots, man. But he can make them. And it's not just reputation that he's a shooter. Like, you watch him in warm-ups, and he can flat out shoot the ball. So maybe why not? At least you can stretch a defense and kind of put him in that same Teskey spot. I don't know. But the fact that we're even having this conversation on February 4th is not good.
The answer is still Isaiah Livers, and that's why I think his fouls were just so kind of backbreaking for them. I mean, maybe he's not a good matchup at Iowa where they are really big.
Yes.
But still, that is the option in an important game, is to just go small just because he is experienced enough to know what the hell's going on both sides of the court, which is really all I think they're looking for at that point. Try Castleton. I mean, at this point, Johns, Davis, I don't really know what the ceiling is you're going to get from them. But I just figure if you haven't been tried at this point, there might be a pretty good reason
that
you're not quite ready.
Yeah. That's going to be a tough spot for them. It'll be really interesting to see what they do going forward. Let's jump to the Rutgers game briefly before we get into the rankings. This is their first meeting, am I right? Yeah?
First and only.
First and only. Piscataway is a weird place to play. No one particularly likes going there for a number of reasons. But, before losing to Ohio State on the road on Saturday, Rutgers had 3 straight wins against Nebraska, Penn State, Indiana. 2 of those wins were at home, Nebraska and Indiana. So, Michigan has every reason to go into this game thinking that this is not the Rutgers of past. This is not an easy waltz. They need to play because I think Rutgers does. The difference with this Rutgers team compared to all the others is that I think this team actually thinks it can win this game, and they've got some grit to them, whatever word you want to use, and it's not Corey Sanders dribbling around for 40 minutes and taking awful shots. They actually
they have Geo Baker dribbling around, taking shots.
He's only taken 124 threes this year so far, so that's just in I don't know. I'm sorry.
How many guys are out there with lower 2-point shooting percentage than lower 3-point shooting percentage? That might be a Rutgers staple right there. Corey Sanders had to have that on his resume.
I would think so.
But he shot 22% on threes. Never mind.
But they can. The point is that they're not winning with their offense either. They are going to junk it up, right? They're going to make you play ugly and win ugly. And Michigan right now, you can make a case that that is not ideal for them.
I would make the case that Michigan would rather play a team that doesn't have Iowa had the offense to run away from them a little bit,
right,
and give them problems. I think Michigan is more than content to play a game in the 50s against the Rutgers team that can't score, because it doesn't magnify the fact that they can't score nearly as much.
Fair. You want to know the strangest Rutgers stat? So they're only shooting 63% on free throws, which ranks 335th in the country. But their opponents are only making 63.5% of their free throws, which ranks as the 6th lowest. And what the hell is that about? Is that the rack? Is that the rack?
Tight rims.
Shit. That's an incredible stat. Wow. Okay.
No free throws. No easy buckets.
That's weird. Well, but speaking of the rack, Rutgers has actually won a fair amount of games there this year, which you really can't say any other year.
No, and even their losses have, I think they lost to Maryland by 14, Michigan State by 11, but everything else has been single digits at home, I think. So they've been competitive basically across the board.
But they're going to attack Michigan on the glass, right? It's a good offensive rebounding team. And yeah, I mean, they can. The last thing that Michigan needs to do is give Rutgers a chance to believe. And I know it's been really hard for Michigan to make shots, but they got to get there and they got to make shots early. And I think put it away, because this is a game that if they're going into the second half and Rutgers thinks that they can do it, that's the worst case scenario for this team, because that's when weird stuff happens in that building. So I think that's the big thing to watch for, is what Michigan does early, and trying to put this thing away and put it out of sight and out of mind that an upset's possible. But that's going to be really hard to do. This is a game that I think is I think this is a really dangerous game for Michigan. I got a weird feeling about it.
Yeah, we talk a lot about comparing to the 2013 season, and kind of sort of has that Penn State loss feel, but Rutgers is a little better than them. It's not. It's definitely a trap game. It's on the road. I mean, it's not that dissimilar to Illinois, where they're going to play a certain way, and you're going to have to deal with that. And if you let them hang around, they're going to get a little energy, and that's just how it is on the road in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Michigan has kind of survived those trap road games in the Big Ten, but we saw it at Northwestern back in December where a couple things just go crazy, everyone gets fired up, and all of a sudden you're in a dogfight that you thought would be sort of a routine win.
For sure. It'll be really interesting to see how the selection committee handles, quote unquote, what's a bad loss in the Big Ten this year, how they are actually viewed. Because right now everyone's just picking each other off, and I think you can make the case that there are very few bad losses in the conference right now.
Well, yeah, most games that teams are playing are either Q1 or Q2. There's not really a bad loss. Like the only Q3, like how many Q3 league games does a team like Michigan play? Probably Penn State at home. Michigan doesn't play Rutgers at home, so. I mean, you're playing a Q1, Q2, a quality game every time out. There's not, and that really is going to help a team like Indiana, who lost 7 in a row, but there are not really that many bad losses in there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's jump to the rankings. We're 55 minutes into this thing, and I got to leave soon for a haircut. So we got priorities, folks. All right, Dylan, you had the first pick in this week's Big Ten power ranking. Thankfully, I had no interest in making the first pick, and I'm glad you had to bite the bullet. So, what you got?
I'm going with Purdue.
Major shakeup.
This
is the first week that it hasn't been Michigan or Michigan State.
And Purdue has won 7 games in a row. They've played a tougher league schedule than Michigan and Michigan State to this point. They are done playing Michigan, Michigan State, or Wisconsin. I think that's right, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I don't really know. I mean, they didn't particularly play well at Penn State or in the first half against Minnesota, but they rallied in both of those games. Right now they're just playing really well, and I don't really know always why. Like Carson Edwards isn't the most efficient player, and he still takes shots and leave you
going 1 for 9 on threes on his home court.
But the rest of their pieces are kind of fitting together in a way I didn't really see. And also, No Gel Eastern makes free throws now, which is, I think I tweeted it out, but he was like a 47% career free throw shooter, and he's made, I have to find the stat now, something like 20. He was 31 of 75 before January 11th as a college player. Now he's made 29 of 35. That's sort of unheard. I can't think of anything like that where someone's just kind of flipped a switch and figured it out. But it just all sort of started.
It can also go at any second with guys like that.
It doesn't look particularly pretty.
No, it's still the same ridiculous looking release. But I like what Ryan Klein's giving them right now. I like when Edwards wants to go to the basket. Like he's still just infuriating to watch sometimes, because when he goes to the basket, he can get there and get fouled pretty much any time that he wants, and he still settles for just a ton of bad jump shots. But Matt Harms on Sunday was awesome. Frankly, he made blocking shots all over the place. He was really active against a team that wants to go and attack the basket. Minnesota does it really, really well because they can't shoot. They went 2 for 16 on threes and were just basically running at the rim all day. And Harms made defensive play after defensive play and put 15 points on the board on the other end. And so suddenly Purdue has this. This was the conversation all in the beginning of the year, was who the hell else do they have around Edwards? Well, some guys have emerged. Eastern's playing much better. Travion Williams, your boy, scored 16 yesterday on an efficient 8 for 11 shooting. and then Harms, who's a great option off the bench when he really comes in with a lot of energy. He can kind of change the look of a game. So, Purdue's playing really, really well. And to win a game when you go 5 for 24 on threes is pretty good.
Not one to put in the Richard Pitino greatest hits.
No.
Up 47-34 with 14 minutes left in the second half.
That's quite a catalog. That's quite a catalog we're talking about there.
Lose by 10. So who do you have at number 2? This would probably be the more controversial one.
Yeah, number 2, I have Michigan. Losing on the road at Iowa. I mean, we can sit here and dissect that game all you want. I don't think there's a lot of shame in that. Iowa right now is about a 5 seed in the NCAA tournament. We can make fun of their defense all they want, but I thought they played pretty sound defense in that game. Michigan definitely showed some of its where its undoings lie. But if Teskey plays a normal 30 minutes in that game, I think Michigan maybe finds a way. Obviously, this is all hypothetical, but I can't ding them too much for a road loss at Iowa. Whereas Michigan State, okay, you lose at Purdue, no harm there whatsoever. But Indiana came into their gym, and their number one most important thing in the Big Ten right now is defending your home court. Mm-hmm. And to let Indiana come in and win with Juwan Morgan going down midway through the first half.
7-game losing streak. It's not a good.
Yeah, and again, fluky things happen. No one expects them to go 10 for 20 on threes. No one expects Michigan to go 8 for 22 on free throws, whatever. But it happened, and it happened on their home court. So I took Michigan at number 2.
I have Michigan State at 3, despite all of that home loss, 2-game losing streak, whatever. They're still first in the Big Ten in efficiency margin.
Yep.
They still are right there in the thick of it and tied for first. Pretty easy to slot them in there.
Okay, so I had number 4. This was fairly easy. I took Wisconsin, which is kind of just very quietly, I think, just rolling along and kind of taking care of business. They're now up to a 5-game winning streak. Last Tuesday took care of Nebraska on the road by 11. Just put them in a box. Nebraska scored 51 points. And then took care of Maryland on its home court on Friday night. And this week they get Minnesota and then the rematch with Michigan.
The game Saturday is a big one. We didn't even really talk about it, but that's
huge
a huge game to kind of
see. Are you coming up for that?
Teams at. Probably. We'll have to see.
Maybe
States.
Maybe there's a weekend pod in the works. What does Michigan State have next weekend? They have Minnesota at home, also a pretty big game. So maybe we do a preview post. We'll talk about that later. We're doing it on the fly here on the moving screen. Wisconsin, I love what they're doing. They've been my pick to finish 3rd in the league. I'm feeling good about it. I'm not feeling great about their schedule because they got a tough stretch coming up here. They have Michigan State back to back. I imagine they're the only team in the league that does that. So we'll see. You agree with that pick there?
Yes, definitely. I got Maryland next. I know they've lost 3 of 4, but as always, it's who you play and where you play. 2 of those 3 losses are at Michigan State and at Wisconsin. Not really a lot of shame in that, and it'll be interesting to see, though. They still play 3 of their next 4 games on the road. They have to go to Nebraska, Michigan, and Iowa in the next 2.5 weeks. That won't be easy. Nebraska is kind of a mess. You said Wisconsin put Nebraska in a box. I think Nebraska might just be permanently moving into the box. That's going downhill quickly. But Maryland, I don't ever quite know what to make of them, but I think they're probably still right here at number 5.
Agreed. Number 6, Iowa. You want to talk about who you play? Iowa's 17-5, and it's 5 losses. 2 are to Michigan State. 1 is Wisconsin, and another one they lost at Minnesota, which isn't great by any means. But I don't think that's that's not some big black eye on their NCAA resume. So they've the difference with this one was they needed I think they needed kind of a marquee league win, and they got it this week. And to their credit, because they're coming off of back-to-back losses, and the Michigan State game kind of exposed some things in that second half when they gave up that ridiculous 24-2 run, and you could really call Iowa's kind of into question after that one. And then they followed that with a loss to Minnesota in a rivalry game, and then bounce back. So that win over Michigan was really, really big, and I think it showed the difference of what they are when they're really engaged defensively. And Joe Wieskamp, what he can give them because they have steady guard play, they got bigs who can score. The thing that makes them different is when Wieskamp is really a focal point of the offense, because he's that athletic scoring wing, which they really haven't had with this kind of current construction. So I think Wieskamp's great, and he's probably a player that people in the league should be talking more about. And I like kind of the direction of Iowa. And they've got a very favorable schedule coming up.
Yeah, it is favorable, but
although
also,
that Indiana game is now looking a little different.
It's also sort of booby-trapped.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of games that, yeah, they can win, but there are also games you're not going to get all the way up for. It's not like Michigan at home. You've got trips to schools like Ohio State, Indiana, Rutgers, Wisconsin, Nebraska, all they're not easy places to go. And I'm curious to see kind of if they can build off that momentum of the Michigan game.
Yep.
And what that really looks like down the stretch. Because they still do have the worst defense in the Big Ten, even after Michigan's performance. But they did find the team that the give up open jump shots defense works against really well. And that paid off on Friday.
Well, they're 6-5 in the league right now. Ken Palm projects them to finish 11-9. That probably sounds about right. I think I would even put them at 12-8. I like their pieces right now. So who you got at number 7?
I have Minnesota, and I can't really get excited about Minnesota, but they're probably still looking like a team that can make the NCAA tournament.
Definitely.
Their computer numbers aren't great, and they've been outscored in Big Ten games. Basically, their offense depends on getting to the free throw line, but they have a lot of size, and they're kind of slugging along here. I think that win at Wisconsin they had in January is really going to be their saving grace down the stretch, I would say.
And they get Wisconsin on their home court this week on Wednesday before going to Michigan State on Saturday. So rough week for Minnesota. I think it's fine if they go 0-2. The bigger question will be how they respond to that. So I think Minnesota could go 0-2 this week and still pretty much be at the same spot in this power ranking maybe next week. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because who's really pushing them from behind there?
Right. So at number 8 we have Indiana. Obviously we've talked about them at length, but just like a quick anecdote: when after the game in the back tunnel, I ran into Bruiser Flint, a fellow St. Joe's alum and old friend back from the Philly days, and just said, God damn, man, I was at the loss to Michigan when Archie was up there calling his team soft and scared, and I see you this week, you look like a completely different team. And he's like, well, yeah, this was a completely different team. They are different with Deron Davis and Devontae Green in the lineup. And I assume they're staying there for the foreseeable future. But there's now a big question mark because in typical Indiana fashion, nothing comes easy really. And, what is the deal with Juwan Morgan? I don't know. If he's okay, I think this is a team that could maybe make a push here in the back half of the Big Ten schedule and put themselves back into the NCAA tournament conversation firmly. Right now, they're probably about they're on the bubble one way or another, probably a 10 or 11 seed if there was a bracket out today. But they need Morgan. You have to have Juwan Morgan. It would be really, really hard for them to actually do this without him. He's kind of the guts of that team, and he really makes things. Because if he's not there, defending Indiana just gets exponentially easier. So, and they're already an easy team to guard because they can't shoot. So that's where I got Indiana. And who you got at 9?
I have Ohio State at 9, and I haven't really known what to make of Ohio State all year. They still their Ken Palm ranking is over 20 spots higher than Minnesota, for example.
Right.
But they're just I don't know. It's hard to make any sense out of their resume, their team. They can basically shoot a little bit, but they turn the ball over too much. It's just they foul too much. Caleb Wesson seems to be sort of an emotional roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
But you also look at their schedule and you could see them getting to close to that 500 mark in the league, and all of a sudden they're in the picture making the tournament. It's just kind of a quintessential bubble team that can only be a bubble team in a league like the Big Ten, where there's enough meat. Like, they're not great in the scope of the Big Ten.
This is the strength of the 20-game schedule. This is the strength of the 20-game schedule right here. Because if they go 10-10, that puts them at 20-10 overall, and they're in. And then they go somewhere and probably get dump trucked in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Their best wins this year are Minnesota at home in December, against Illinois and Chicago, Nebraska on the road. Like, that's it. Other than if you want to go back into early November, but that's really all they've done since the beginning of December. They haven't beaten anybody really. There's nothing that jumps out at you. I think they have to win a game at some point for me to say that they're anything above what we have them at right now, which is ninth in the conference. So, okay, number 10, I took Illinois. We talked about why we like the Illini. This is a big game on Tuesday night down there. And another team that, Archie Miller just picked up his kind of marquee win of his early tenure, right? I do believe Brad Underwood is still seeking the same. Did they have any? They did not have a big win last year. This is it. This is a chance for Underwood to probably pick up, right, the big check mark, which is an interesting storyline in this game. So we'll see. It's definitely for Michigan and Michigan State playing Illinois and Rutgers. I would be uneasy about both, if we're being honest here.
You also wouldn't be surprised if either team won by 20.
Surely not. No.
Next, I have Rutgers. We talked a lot about Rutgers. They're probably have they ever not finished last in the Big Ten?
No.
So they're looking good for that. Shout out Pat Chambers, but they're in a good spot. So we'll give some credit to Rutgers. I don't really. I mean, what are you going to say about? They're playing hard.
Well deserved. Yeah,
they're winning games.
They are, and they are no one wants to play them, and they can junk you up. I think it's pretty impressive what Steve Beichel has done there just to make this a competitive situation. I don't know what actual step they could take forward, but the fact that this is the conversation right now because he just inherited an absolute doormat. So good for him. Good for Rutgers. All right, is this me now?
You have Nebraska next.
I mean, the fact that Nebraska isn't 14th is really just at some point we might just have to do it to them just because they're doing it to themselves.
So, I have a talking point here. Nebraska right now is still 33rd in the net, which makes them a Q1 win on the road and a Q2 win at home. Right now, a lot of these teams in the Big Ten have a nice juicy Q1 win at Nebraska. How many more can they give up before they drop? Like, I don't know. Will they drop to 75 if they keep losing? I mean,
they have to, right?
They were so good at the start of the year, and it'll be interesting to see. I'm curious to watch that because they're like one of the little check mark on everyone's resume with all these wins over Nebraska, but at the same time, it's gonna go. It's going down.
I think it'll ultimately fall. I don't know how a team with Glenn Watson and James Palmer and these guys who are these perceived scorers. Nebraska has not scored over 70 points in a game since January 10th against Penn State when they scored 70 on the nose. Like, they are a complete mess. They're down to 8th in the league in offensive efficiency, which I'm actually legitimately surprised that's not lower. So yeah, I think they'll ultimately. I can't imagine them finishing the year as a quad one win
on the road,
but we'll see. On the road, right? This week they have Maryland on their home court, and then they go to Purdue. So Godspeed there, Huskers. Is this me next?
No, I have Northwestern next. Worst offense in the Big Ten, and I mean, you start to think about, like, where's this thing going in Evanston? Chris Collins is going to lose 3 more seniors off of this team, and they never really built off of that momentum from the NCAA tournament a couple years ago. I don't know. The offense is just awful. They can't create any easy 2-point shots, and they can't get any offensive rebounds.
It's a bad combination. This is life at the bottom of the league. At number 14, we have our friends at Penn State, and if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. So, good luck, Penn State, the rest of the way. I do hope they pick up one at some point. I just don't know when or where. They have Northwestern this week. Maybe that could be it, but that's on the road. That's kind of tough.
The last time Michigan had a big undefeated streak, they went to Penn State and lost to a team that hadn't won a league game. So
be careful. There's a trip to Happy Valley coming up for the
parallel
Wolverines.
is there.
There you go. All right, that's going to do it for this week's show. Be sure to rate, subscribe. If you want to leave a review, say some nice things about Dylan. I don't know about me, but we really do appreciate everyone listening and sharing this thing with anyone who might enjoy it. It's really a labor of love. So, you got anything to say on the way out, Dylan?
I think we've got it covered at this point.
All right, man. All right. Well, thanks for listening, everyone, and be sure to tip your bartenders and your servers.